Type 17? What's the point? There are basically two standard points available on a wood screw. One is the Type 17 drill point. The other one is the sharp gimlet point. The Type 17 drill point actually cuts through the fibers as it's being screwed into the wood. The gimlet point forces itself into the wood without cutting the fibers. We're being told that the advantage of a Type 17 point is that it won't split the wood as it's being screwed in like a gimlet point does. But is that true? Let's check it out. Here we're taking a Type 17 drill point screw and screwing it into a piece of decking board. We're 1/2 inch from the edge, which is closer than you should ever be. Okay, it looks like there's a little split there. Let's try putting a gimlet pointed screw into the same board. This screw is exactly the same diameter, but it has a gimlet point instead of a Type 17. Hey wait, this one didn't split the lumber much either. Let's try another Type 17. One thing you'll notice on both the screws we put in with the Type 17s, they're pretty hard to get started. That's because the threads are missing where the Type 17 is cut in. Once again, there's a small split in the lumber, but not much. Let's try another screw with a gimlet point. As you can see, the screw starts right into the lumber. That's because the threads go all the way to the point. Once again, hardly any split. We found that in typical soft lumber such as pine or other decking materials, the Type 17 point really does little or nothing to stop splitting. Here, the light colored screws have a Type 17 drill point. The dark colored screws have a good sharp gimlet point. There's hardly any difference in the splitting of the lumber, even though we're only 1/2 inch away from the edge. There is a place for a Type 17 point. It's an excellent point for very hard wood, such as oak or mahogany. Let's take a look again at how these screws start. The Type 17 point has threads missing, so it's slow to start, where the gimlet point starts right in. We found that it takes about 2.2 seconds longer to start a screw with a Type 17 point. If you look at a 25-pound box of 2.5 inch screws, there'd be 2,100 screws there. That means it would take 1 1/4 hours longer to drive 25 pounds of screws that have a Type 17 point. If you remember in the beginning, we mentioned that the Type 17 drill point actually cuts the fiber in the wood. One thing that happens when you cut the fiber is it reduces the pull-out strength of the screw. Our engineers performed testing to check the pull-out strength on a screw with a Type 17 point versus a screw with a gimlet point. The screws were identical diameter with identical threads and were driven to the same depth into the board. Multiple screws were tested. The only difference was one set of screws had a gimlet point and the other set had a Type 17. The screws with the Type 17 point had a pull-out strength that was 49 pounds less than those with the gimlet point. This is because the fibers in the wood are cut when the Type 17 point is driven in. How important is pull-out strength? It can be very important, especially with today's pressure-treated lumber and the high moisture content. As the lumber dries, it'll shrink and warp and try to pull away from its fastening. Type 17 takes more time to install, it reduces pull-out strength, doesn't really stop the splitting, and it costs more. What's the point?